Thanksgiving in its form celebrated within the United States of America is considered a time of giving thanks for all that people might have had during the year, and as a prelude to the end of year celebrations, as well as often being considered uniquely American. But details in terms of what the holiday is have changed and not exactly discussed or even taught to American citizens. The forgotten history. There was never a united consensus if a quote-unquote Thanksgiving feast should have been done in what was considered colonial America prior to its independence in 1776. When English settlers arrived in what's now considered to be the northeastern United States, they actually performed religious services owing to the circumstances in England at the time. There was never a united celebration of family, friends, or being thankful for what they had had. Rather, it was thankful for their faith on their perseverance of enduring all that had occurred through the year. These sorts of endurance celebrations occurred very early within American history, with some of the earliest being performed in 1607. Prior to this year, the exact details are somewhat debatable as English settlement actually commenced in the 1580s, but these efforts weren't successful nor stable until the early 1600s. The status within these settlements was so unstable that there were minor celebrations, but nothing seen on the scale of meaning nor celebration until, as mentioned, after the 1600s. But even then, various settlements performed their own rituals or celebrations or gatherings, even owing to their individual beliefs, customs, or even preferences of overall English origin. But there were nothing implemented within the colonies as a whole, other than what regional or local settlements allowed, or even encouraged, as acts of civility. The denied history. As an act of celebration to unite the colonies of North America against the British Crown, the Continental Congress in 1777 made one of the first real proclamations encouraging an act of thanks for all that they had within the colonies. As when the American Revolution started, the Congress, as well as the founding fathers of the United States, knew that there needed to be a celebration that the peoples within the colonies can relate to, as well as feel proud to celebrate. Upon its victory of independence from Britain, the National Thanksgiving Proclamation was proclaimed, and was the oldest national practice of such countrywide, internationally even at the time. However, despite the fact that Thanksgiving was proclaimed a national holiday, there were divisions among the founding fathers themselves about what necessarily is a Thanksgiving concept, as it went as far even as Thomas Jefferson, who was argued at being a modern-day atheist or non-believer of Christianity. Due in part to his beliefs, he did not declare any Thanksgiving celebrations during his tenure as president, as there were then sporadic movements to enforce the proclamation of Thanksgiving nationally within the United States. But nothing was truly done until the American Civil War, where the then president of Abraham Lincoln, encouraged by other supporters and proponents of Thanksgiving at the time, had it that Thanksgivings in the United States were to be held in the end of November. One of the reasons why the edicts by Lincoln was so effective on the fact that the American citizens actually started to celebrate the presidential decree is that prior to 1863, a good amount of the United States population still celebrated Evacuation Day, which was a holiday on the 25th of November where the British Army had left New York in defeat after the Revolutionary War had concluded. This was one of the real reasons for the move towards a united, nationally celebrated Thanksgiving, rather than the country just agreeing to celebrate Thanksgiving at the end of November. Despite Lincoln's decree that Thanksgiving were to be held in the end of the month of November, the exact day of Thanksgiving was still something of a debate or celebrated slightly differently depending on where in the country in terms of state or even localities within the states were to be commemorated. The first use of the phrase Thanksgiving Day nationally within the United States was in the year of 1929 with the then president of Calvin Coolidge, as that was done in part to make the holiday more appealing to citizens to celebrate. In 1939, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt moved the date of Thanksgiving to 1 week earlier than the usual last week of November due to there being extra time at that particular time. This was done in part due to his idea that the Thanksgiving celebrations would boost the economy through retail sales. This was considered a logical decision made at the time because the United States was still within the Great Depression, and a jolt to the economy in terms of spending and buying were gravely needed. Republicans called the moving of the holiday blasphemous, as there were sharp and vocal aspects of criticism nationally against the decision. The Second World War soon occurred globally, and any real criticisms against the time change of the holiday were withheld. In 1941, the United States Congress made a compromise on Roosevelt's decision and established Thanksgiving on the fourth Thursday of November. After the Second World War concluded and the post-war period began within the United States, states gradually moved their times of celebration to the date enforced and promoted by the government. The Censored History. Since its conception, Thanksgiving in the United States has been viewed with a sort of romanticized understanding that the European settlers and indigenous peoples of the northeastern United States came together to have a feast, as well as a mutual understanding of each other's cultures and beliefs. However, the truth in terms of details were that early European colonists had no real understanding nor care of the New World in relation to the European regions they had left. The foods, animals, geography, and weather were all massively different than the English, French, or Germanic regions of Europe that the settlers had left. In the colonies, the settlers actually fared very poorly, and native tribes of the region near the English settlements actually took pity on them and gave them food as well as teaching them how to use the land to survive. The first Thanksgiving in the year of 1621 actually had settlers cold, dying, and starving, begging for help from the native peoples even. This truth would have been possibly lost to posterity if it were not for the tribes themselves witnessing what had occurred, and through oral tradition passed it on to future generations where it is now acknowledged as truth in modern times. In terms of the Thanksgiving holiday, it was propped up by the United States government that the colonization of the English and even Americans were mostly benign, and the native peoples of the North American continent, which is now the United States of America, had slight misunderstandings of European culture but were mostly open-minded about being British subjects or later American citizens. Prior to the 20th century, only Native Americans necessarily saw themselves of knowing the truth of the details of the first Thanksgiving. The whole notion of what the truth was, and what's now considered Thanksgiving within the United States, has been thoroughly questioned. But since most of the population now knows the truth of the holiday in terms of what happened through the United States' history, from English settlements to American Revolution and later American suppression of the exact details of Thanksgiving, even denial of some of the aspects has many to even question what should be celebrated, if anything at all.